on Sunday. Props and ops. Sitting pretty on a Monday. Props and ops. You know it's betting and beer with props and ops and props and ops.
Welcome to Between the Lines, powered by the Hammer Betting Network and under the Props and Hops umbrella of content. On this show, we go through the biggest line movements from the sharpest books that take the highest amount of limits, and we do so here with our sharp betting expert, Fabian Sommer. How is it going today?
Jacob, yes, it's going all right. Early Wednesday for us, so let's rock.
Yeah, just filling in for this week as the host. We are recording this, by the way, at 9 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. So anything that changes throughout the day before this goes out, we are not aware of, but we are going to operate with the present information that we have. I am usually the producer behind the scenes, but like I said, just going to be filling in as host for this week. And we've got a lot of crazy line movement to talk about. First, want to touch on what we saw last week. We did see some crazy games here. Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, as well as Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, fall to 2-1 in some games that really, based on the game script, how it all played out, I felt like both of those teams should have won. But the Miami Dolphins come through, and as do the Indianapolis Colts. Suuma, any games catch your attention from last week that you want to discuss quickly?
Yeah, I think Indianapolis Colts against the KC Chiefs was a little bit more lopsided, in my opinion, than Dolphins Bills. I mean, Dolphins played a very good game offensively. It was just that the Bills ran like 45 plays more and had long sustaining drives and kind of failed in the end. And Josh Allen also had that fumble in front of his own goal line. But overall, I think that the Colts got outplayed more severely than the Dolphins. The Chiefs should have won that game very easily. I mean, Matt Ryan, I watched this game this morning and man, he looks cooked. He really looks cooked.
He does.
Mean, there's no zip on his throws. I mean, it's really looking ugly. I mean, it doesn't get any help from his offensive line or from his wide receiving group, but the Colts have built their offense in a way that requires sharp quarterback play. They don't have a lot of speed on the field. They need to fit balls into tight windows, and they thought Matt Ryan would provide that skill. But as of now, he doesn't look to be that guy.
Yeah, and speaking of cooked, we're talking about Matt Ryan. Let's also touch quickly on the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson. I know they got the win, and I remember last week you went a little bit in on Nathaniel Hackett, but they somehow pulled through with the 11-10 win in that one. What did you make of Russell Wilson's performance, and maybe compare that to what you saw from Matt Ryan?
I'm not as concerned about the Broncos offense than I'm about the Colts offense. I think the Broncos, they have a solid offensive line. They have a solid skill position group. They got KJ Hamler back last week. Jerry Jeudy was a little bit banged up. I think that the whole offense doesn't really look all that smooth and cohesive. And Russell Wilson is not playing great at all. But I don't have the same expression that I have with Matt Ryan that Russell Wilson might be rushed or something. He's absolutely not playing up to his standard, but he's not doing the, let's say, wonky plays that Matt Ryan is doing. I think the Broncos offense, as of right now, has a lot more room to grow than the Colts, in my opinion.
All right, I agree with that. And as it comes to the Colts as well in that game, kind of a testament to how important kicking can be for the Kansas City Chiefs. They miss a field goal, I believe, and they go for a field goal fake on a 4th and 10, just showing that they don't have a lot of faith in the backup kicker. I believe was Amendola there. But regardless of that, let's move into the line movement that we want to talk about. And we touched on the Dolphins beating Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, and they have a short rest week. They are going into Thursday night football at the Cincinnati Bengals. Tua Tagovailoa had his back injury in that one on the weekend. We'll see if he's going to be featuring this one, but this is actually a matchup that I and many other people of the Hammer Betting Network are going to be in attendance for. If you're a fan of the show, Luke's Locks will be doing a live show from outside of the stadium there at the tailgate. And if you're a fan of that show, there's going to be some great content there from Luke. If you're not a fan of that show, I suggest you start becoming a fan and look out for that episode coming out tomorrow. But the line movement in this one, opened at -3 at circa in favor of the Bengals, the 1-2 Bengals against the 3-0 Dolphins. A little bit surprising me. BetCris opened this at -1.5. It has moved to about 4 now for the Bengals, above a field goal, favored for the Bengals. Suuma, is this just because of the Tua injury, or is there something else in this matchup that we should discuss?
I think there are several factors coming together. First of all, it's the uncertainty with Tua Tagovailoa. So at this point, it seems like he's somehow going to play, but there's some uncertainty about his health status, and there's also some uncertainty whether there's some uncertainty whether he's going to play, and if he's going to play, how healthy he's going to be. I think the injuries he's taken last Sunday are not so drastic that I would expect a huge drop in terms of production or efficiency. If he's not going to play, I think we are going to see Teddy Bridgewater get ruled in, and that line will jump towards -6 in my opinion. Then we also have the let's say, I don't want to say a narrative, but everyone has talked about it now. The Dolphins defense was on the field for 90 snaps last Sunday during regulation. I went back and checked the data. Since 2010, there were just 2 games where defenses were playing on a short week coming off a 90+ snaps game. And it's a very, very low sample size. So this is just the 3rd time the team will have to play on a short week after that. In general, what the Dolphins defense did last Sunday was just the, I think, 53rd most since 2010. So there were 52 instances where teams were on the field at 90 or more, for 90 or more snaps. Most recently in week 1, it was the Houston Texans against the Colts, and it was the Bengals defense, the Steelers defense against the Bengals in week 1. I think, in general, there's a small dip in efficiency for defenses of a game where they play so many snaps, but it's also not that drastic. So, I think it's a little bit overblown. I might look stupid for this sentence on Friday, but I think in general it's a little bit overblown. I mean, this game, short week for the road team, rookie head coach, first short week to prepare. Tua Tagovailoa uncertainty. Defense coming off 90 snaps. I think this is a sum of all parts that has driven the Bengals line towards -4. I'm looking at -4, -15 at Chris right now. And if we get bad news on Tua, I would not be surprised if we saw a line movement towards -6 if Teddy's going to play.
So what if we get good news on Tua? Do you think this line is going to move in the opposite direction? Could we see this going back to under a field goal? What do you think happens if Tua is announced that he is going to be playing in this one?
If he's announced I would expect some Dolphins money to come in, but I don't think it will be enough to get this towards the 3. I think 3.5, maybe a very soft 3 might be the maximum that we are going to see.
Interesting. And I suspect you were talking about the statistics of defense that stay on the field for a long time and the Dolphins are one of those teams, like you said, I think it was like 90 snaps. Do these teams typically find success in these games when defense is on the field for extended periods of time, or is it typically met with the team not doing so well?
These defenses usually perform worse in the game after they've been on the field for so long. But it's not a difference of like giving up a touchdown more or something. It's a small difference, but I think in general it's a little bit overblown. And the second issue is that we have no data or almost no data for short weeks. We have had like 2 games since 2010. One was the Bucs defense against the Falcons in 2016, but that was also the Kyle Shanahan, Matt Ryan MVP offense. So you would usually perform much worse against that defense, against that kind of offense anyway. So it's really hard to take any useful conclusions off of that.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on Tua's situation leading to that one, but let's transition to the next game. We have the Vikings visiting the Saints, and the spread in this one caught my eye a little bit. I have not been a fan of the Saints. I've not been a fan of Jameis Winston so far this season, but the Vikings opened at -2.5. It touched briefly at -3 at BetCris. It has stayed consistently at circa at -2.5. So the Vikings can win by a field goal here and cover that one. What do you make of this spread staying relatively the same all throughout the week so far?
Yeah, I think it will be interesting what type of injury report we are going to get out of the Saints. We have Michael Thomas banked up, we have Jarvis Landry banked up, and this Saints offense has been very, very bad to begin with. So I think that's what's ultimately going to drive that line. If there are some bad news with those guys, I can expect, or I would expect some more Vikings money to enter the market. Dalvin Cook is also a factor. It sounds like he won't make it this week. And Dalvin Cook has had a tiny impact on the Lions in the past. So that's also an injury to monitor. But in general, I think the Vikings are rightfully favored here. And the injury reports will ultimately decide whether we will get to that field goal or not come Sunday.
Yeah. And Dalvin Cook was not so good 2 weeks ago. This past week, he was excellent. Had almost 100 yards rushing and didn't even play the entire game, as you mentioned, with that injury. So I suspect if he's back, we could get this to a full field goal, get to -3, but we will have to see in that regard. But let's move on to the next match. And this is one where I am just so confused. We have the Chargers at the Texans. If you told me a few weeks ago that we would have the Chargers favored by less than a touchdown against the Houston Texans, and we would have money flooding in on the Texans, I would have called you crazy. But here we are today. Circa started this at -6, BetCris at -6.5. We're now at -5 at both of these books. BetCris actually went down to -4.5 at one point. What is going on with the Chargers, Suuma? You got to help me out here.
Yeah, injuries, and a little bit of bad coaching, I would say. So Justin Herbert's rib cartilage injury is very concerning because you could see it in the KC game. You could see it last week. I have no clue why Brandon Staley kept him in the game, but it didn't really look good. I mean, this offense in general doesn't have a lot of speed. That offense looks like the typical Saints Drew Brees offense. And the differentiating factor has always been what can Justin Herbert do when he's out of structure or when he's actually attempting some of these deep passes, because he's pretty good at it. But now with that injury and with no speed element on the field, you are basically taking away the only explosive plays from that Chargers offense. And furthermore, that offensive line is absolutely in shambles. They lost Rashawn Slater, left tackle. Corey Linsley was out last week. Right tackle Trey Pipkins was out last week. Keenan Allen is coming back from a hamstring injury. They are without Joey Bosa and likely JC Jackson on the defensive side. So they are really, really charging already, losing key players left and right. And yeah, that's the big reason why this opened north of the 7 or north of the -7. And some early money on the Texans, I think in hindsight, rightfully so, because it's very hard to quantify the impact of Justin Herbert's injury. And now you have all these confounding factors contributing to a decline in efficiency.
So the Chargers were perceived to be one of the best teams, I'd say, in the NFL going into this season. And even after losing to the Chiefs, it was still apparent that they were a force to be reckoned with in the NFL. But now, a losing record, do you think it's time to panic for this team, or do you think that there's still time to figure everything out?
I think it is time to panic. The only positive point is that neither team in the AFC West is 3-1. 3-0 right now. So that's the only positive. But in general, their defense is not good, which was the focus point of the whole offseason. They are without their two best defensive players outside of Derwin James. Their offensive line is in shambles. Their quarterback is hurt. Their receiving corps lost their only speed element in Jalen Guyton. And also the coaching staff is very, very questionable so far. Like all these bad decisions by Brandon Staley, Joe Lombardi not maximizing Justin Herbert's skill set. I think it's a really, really tough situation for the Chargers. And this injury for Justin Herbert, he's going to feel it until late October. That's usually like a 6-week timeline.
Yep.
So I haven't checked their upcoming schedule before the show, but if it's a few good opponents, it's looking really ugly for them, in my opinion.
Let's just kind of check in quickly now that you mention it. So they've got the Texans for this week. Then they've got the Browns, the Broncos, the Seahawks, and then the Falcons. That will take us into November, about the time frame you've mentioned with that injury. Not a tremendous looking group of teams that they're playing against. I think this kind of factored into the Chargers being one of the best teams, not having the most difficult of schedules. It will depend, I think, a little bit on if the Broncos can kind of figure it out with Wilson and Hackett. But that seems decently manageable. But I really think that if this team falls to 1-3, there could be more than maybe just you and me pushing the panic button on this group. So let's move on into one of the teams I mentioned there, the Cleveland Browns, who will be visiting the Atlanta Falcons. We have a side and total on this one that we want to discuss. And for the Atlanta Falcons, I always felt like they were a little bit undervalued in terms of their market. They kind of were expected to be a bottom 3, bottom 4 team in the NFL, but they've looked a little bit better than that. Got a nice win against the Seahawks. And for this one, we're going to go to the total first of all, because we've seen a lot of movement as a result of some unfortunate injuries. Started at 46.5, got it up to 48.5. And then after the unfortunate news with Myles Garrett, we hope everything goes well there. It jumped up to 49.5. And now you can find it around 49.5 and 50. What have you made of the line movement that was already trending upwards initially, and then even more after the announcement with Myles Garrett?
Yeah, I think the only unit on the in this particular matchup that has been playing as advertised is the Falcons defense, which has been pretty Swiss cheesy, to be honest. But both offenses look really, really good. The Falcons rank 8th in EPA per play, 2nd in success rate. The Browns rank 6th in EPA per play and 9th in success rate. And the Browns also have the best running game in the league, and it's not even close. And neither defense has looked very good. The Browns were without Jadeveon Clowney last week. Don't know whether he's going to make it. Myles Garrett had that terrible car accident. We don't know whether he's going to play. So we have two offenses that are really playing above expectations, but without, let's say, the big variance factor. So there has been nothing in those performances where I say, oh, it was lucky, it was random variance. They're really, really looking good. They're good on early downs, and they have decent matchups against the opposing defense. That's why I think we saw this total creeping up. There was a release from a pick service early on Monday that brought this total from 46.5 to 48.5 on Monday. Then there was the news about the Myles Garrett car crash. We saw another uptick to 49.5 after the Garrett news. And now it's sitting around 49.5 and 50 across the board right now. I'm looking at 49.5 at Chris and 50 at Circa. If Myles Garrett is going to play, if he can make it, I would see some under money coming to the market. But overall, I don't think there are too many compelling arguments for or as to why there should be a lot of under money coming into the market until Sunday. And if Clowney and Garrett are indeed out, I would also not be surprised to see a little bit more of over money.
Yeah, it makes sense. The Falcons offense has looked decent. Patterson was great last week. Mariota has kind of surprised me how well he's playing. But like you said, the defense, a lot of holes in that one, going to be allowing a lot of points. And when you're coming against the formidable run game of the Browns, that's something that could put up a bunch of points. But let's also talk about the side for this one. Now, bear with me. BetChris opens this at +3 for the Falcons, moves down to +2. And then with the news of Myles Garrett, that becomes a pick 'em. A little bit of buyback on that happened pretty quickly as well. Didn't stay as a pick 'em for very long. We can now see this at a spread of 1 favoring the Cleveland Browns. Circa, on the other hand, was at -3.5 and moved this to 2.5 and stayed pretty comfy in that spot. A little bit of a discrepancy between these two books. What do you see on the side?
I just think that the fact that this is not a -3 for the Browns, and we had that money on the Falcons coming in before the Myles Garrett news on Monday. So I think the early money is pretty much telling us that the Falcons offense is much better than we thought going to the season. And this tells me that there is some respect in the market for this offense that is really, really looking good. I mean, without 6 turnovers from Marcus Mariota, and yeah, that's part of his game, but he also had like 2 very, very bad fumbles inside the Saints red zone, I think, and also inside the Seahawks 45-yard line. So without those fumbles, they could easily be a top 5 team in terms of EPA per play. And who could have thought this before the season? And they're really doing some pretty good stuff. They're using all these pistol formations. They are using against the Seahawks, I think in the second half, they used a pistol full house formation where Kyle Pitts was basically lined up as a running back and was running kind of a wheel route out of the backfield. So they're doing some really, really funky stuff. And I think bettors are just seeing a team that is outperforming preseason expectations.
Yep. And with that, the line movement showcases bettors are favoring the Falcons a little bit more than expected going into this season. And I would say I have to kind of support the direction this has moved in here, but maybe could be interesting for the Browns, who were expected to be such a force going into the season. But let's keep moving. A team that wasn't expected to be a force, maybe not really showing that yet, but has gained a lot of respect in the markets. The Detroit Lions are going to be hosting the Seattle Seahawks. Even with the marginal loss, I think it was 28-24 to the Vikings last week, the Lions, I think, gained a lot of respect in the market. And I think if some decision making and some plays just kind of go a little bit their way, so maybe some coin flip sort of decisions, the Lions come away with that one with the win. And the offense has definitely looked impressive here. And initially, we had this one at -6 from Circa and BetChris. This moved all the way to just a short tick up to -6.5. People were loving the Lions initially, but since then, lots of money going to the Seahawks. We had the -5 on, we have the -5 now on Circa, and we have the -4 now actually on BetChris. What do you make of these lines on Seattle, who are visiting the Lions?
I think that the early money on the spread has been telling us that the opener was way too high. Home field advantage in the NFL is not big at all. I think this season we are looking at minus 0.9 points for home teams as an average scoring margin. Home field advantage has been decreasing for years. And the -6 is telling us that the win probability for the Lions against the Seahawks would have been 70%. And now you have to ask yourself the question: the Lions, who are very hyped in the market, are 1-2. Do they deserve to be or to have a 70% win percentage against any team in the league right now? And I think early money has told us no, they don't. They also have like the DeAndre Swift injury. He's likely going to be out. There is some injury concern with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has been their best player on offense so far this season.
Very, very good. Yeah.
Very, very good. I luckily got him on both my dynasty drafts this year. Very happy about that. I think late third, early fourth round. Yeah, great player. In general, I just think that the market has told us that whoa, Lions cannot be -6 or -6.5, not even against the Seahawks, who have been kind of solid on offense. They can run the ball. The Lions' run defense has been atrocious so far. So yeah, I just think that it was too high of an opener. I would not expect this to get back to -6, -6.5. If Amon-Ra St. Brown gets ruled in, I would see an uptick in Detroit money, but I think we are probably in the dead range, 4, 4.5, 5 for the rest of the week.
And you were touching on St. Brown, how good of an asset he is in fantasy. I'm on the other end of the spectrum here. I've got DeAndre Swift in my league, and
Oh
very
man.
frustrating. Lots of red zone touches for the Lions, especially for running backs. All of them are going to Jamal Williams rather than DeAndre Swift. So kind of eating that one so far after an impressive week one from Swift. But there's also a lot of movement on the total here that we want to discuss. Started at about 48 here for these teams, and now it's sitting pretty comfortably at about 50. You touched on the offenses here. Is that what people are noticing when they bet this up to 50?
Yes, every Lions total this season has been getting bet up. Week one, it got bet up to, I think, as high as 50 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Week two, it got bet up against Washington. And week three, it also got bet up against the Vikings. And then we saw like late under money just right before post. So I think this is just the natural Lions market behavior that people are seeing a good offense, a bad defense, and they keep slamming their totals, even though scoring has been pretty low for the NFL this year.
And the Lions are a team that likes to take a lot of risk as well. They go for it on fourth downs. It was decently profitable for the most part against the Vikings, maybe despite some late game times where it didn't go as well, but you got to go for it to get the reward. They reaped a lot of the benefits of that. It comes with the risk associated with it. So a lot of points for the Lions so far, a lot against as well. But let's move into the next window of games here. We got one in particular we want to talk about. The New England Patriots are going to visit the Green Bay Packers, and the Patriots decently impressive in that game against Baltimore. And another reality, they easily could have come out with the win if it wasn't for a late turnover there on a fumble. But no Mac Jones, it seems, for an extended period of time. Ankle injury, Calais Campbell fell on him, and Campbell is a huge guy. If he falls on your ankle, I'm going to give you as much time as you need to come back from that one. But -9.5, it opened at, got bet up to 10.5 for the Packers, even touched 11 very briefly at circa, but now this one is back to a -10, a field goal and a touchdown favored for the Packers. Is this a spread that you've looked at and kind of noticed anything interesting?
I expected this exact range around 10. Packers at home, good looking defense. Aaron Rodgers and the offense got better, even though they had a lot of issues against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right after halftime. I think the betting market is still deciphering whether the Packers have a lot of upset offensively because they have they're just getting the band back together along their offensive line, lots of young receivers. So is there room for improvement, or is that already their ceiling? The Pats, I think they have been priced as an average team at best in the marketplace early in the season. Now you take away Mac Jones, who had a great rookie season, who has been looking solid this season so far. He had a very good game against the Ravens, even though he had a couple of turnovers, but he was really moving around very well, slinging the ball downfield. But now when you plug in Brian Hoyer or maybe even Bailey Zappi, that rookie quarterback, with that receiving group, I don't know what the ceiling of that can be. I think it's a very, very low floor, and it's always Bill Belichick and a, let's say, defense that can play up to matchups on a week-to-week basis. I think last week they took away Rashad Bateman against the Ravens, but this week, who are they going to take away? We don't know who's going to be that guy for the Packers this week. I think a number of around 10 will be the deciding key number for the rest of the week. I think there's too much respect for the Packers to bring this down towards 8, but I also think that there will be some buyback again if this number would touch 10.5 again, like we saw with that game, I think yesterday evening my time, where we suddenly had Patriots money flooding the market.
Yeah, and I agree with all this. The Patriots, I think, might be better suited to go with Hoyer for this one. Belichick, the type of coach to go with somebody who is a little bit more seasoned, somebody who can kind of trust maybe a little bit more than going with a rookie. Although, maybe you think for this season with the injury, is it better to kind of give that rookie a little bit more experience? So I'm interested to see what happens there. Do you think any sort of announcement about who is going to start this game will have any effect on the spread whatsoever? Or are these two QBs who are not capable to move the market here?
I think that Brian Hoyer would be rated slightly higher than Bailey Zappi because it's I think, a mid-round rookie starting in his first ever game on the road against a decent defense. With these kind of performances, you always have a fair tail to the left side in terms of performances, because at some point there are some confounding factors where these guys get into more errors than seasoned veterans. So I would expect Brian Hoyer to be rated just slightly higher than Bailey Zappi.
Interesting. And what's also interesting is the total for this one, which has seen some movement. We have an Aaron Rodgers game with a total this low. It's a little bit surprising to me. We had it started around 42 to 42.5, got bet down to 40.5, and it actually briefly was in the 39s here. And like I said, an Aaron Rodgers game with a total that low seems a little bit strange to me. But after last week, the Packers only put up 14 against a decent Buccaneers defense. Barely come out of that one with the win, and we'll talk about the Buccaneers in just a second here. But a total this low, does that give you any sort of surprise? And in fact, it got bet down from its initial low amount of 42.
No, it didn't surprise me at all. I'm just checking the weather updates simultaneously. But the Packers, now I got it, 1 second. We're currently looking at 10 miles per hour wind, so there's nothing to argue. I think early in the week it looked a little bit worse, but the Packers, they scored 7 points against the Vikings, they scored 27 points against the Bears, and then 14 against the Bucs. Like we said, the offensive line is just getting back together. Some question marks with the young guys at their receiving group. Is still a Bill Belichick defense where there's some respect in the market. And on the other side, the Pats offense, depending on who's going to play, could be a disaster. So I really think that the betting market has told us that we don't expect too much from either offense, and we should bet this down towards the low 40s.
That makes sense. And like I was mentioning, the Packers face off against the Buccaneers in that pretty low scoring affair. And we're going to move on to the primetime window. The Chiefs coming off that loss to the Indianapolis Colts. We talked about it earlier. Game script wise, kind of shocking that the Chiefs actually lost this game based how it all went down, based on the performance overall from the Colts and Matt Ryan. Looking to bounce back against the Buccaneers, who fell to the Packers 14-12. Some clock management issues, it seemed like, kind of late. The play clock, that is. Seemed like the touchdown the Buccaneers got late maybe shouldn't have counted. And then they paid the price on the possible 2-point conversion, or at least the attempt, as they were forced back 5 yards and ultimately could not convert. The Tom Brady offense hasn't looked stellar this season. We'll give him credit. They are missing quite a few of those offensive weapons, Mike Evans in particular last week. And the total maybe reflected that a little bit early. It was at 46.5 for this one, got bet down to 43.5, which again, to me, looking at this Chief offense, seems a little bit strange, but with the Buccaneers defense and offense maybe not at, or the offense not at full level, but the defense still holding firm, makes a bit of sense. But the bettors maybe saw through this one a little bit at 43.5, bet this one back up to 45.5. What have you made of the line movement on this one?
My best assumption is that there were some groups or guys that simply bet on weather variance early in the week, because we have that hurricane floating over Florida this weekend. And right now it looks like the game might be played at either New Orleans or Minneapolis. So I think early some bettors took just blindly some unders because they thought, okay, one, we have the weather variance, and secondly, there might also be the case where the Bucs might not get Julio Jones back, no Donovan Smith, so they might be short-handed on offense again. I think those were two potential factors. And then once we heard some news that they are going to move their practice to Miami, and there might be a change of venue towards a dome, I think that might have been a reason for bettors to come back on the low total and push it up towards, I think I'm currently looking at 45 at Pinnacle, 45.5 at Quiz and Circa. I think we're going to wait for some news. If it's a dome game and the Bucks are going to get some players back, we might see even more over money. We just have to wait and see with some news on this one.
How do you typically feel about bettors kind of banking on these weather conditions earlier in the week, or maybe betting on essentially they're gambling on a movement of location, they're gambling on weather? How do you feel about that sort of strategy? Do you think it's a profitable strategy long term, or is it not?
I think if you can get money down early in the week and you have all the opportunities to buy back later or even middle some games, I think it's a very sound strategy. So on Monday or even early Tuesday morning, you could blindly bet some, let's say 3 or 4 games where the weather could shift towards a bad direction. And then if the market follows and it drops down like a half or 1 or 2 points, then you can already maybe around some key numbers middle that game, and you have a plus EV opportunity in your pocket.
Interesting. And it seems like maybe a lot of people took advantage of that one on the total, but the side in this one has also seen some movement. Opened at a very soft 3, moved to 2.5, and then now we find it at 2. BetCris did have some buyback on KC to 3 initially because there was a big wave of Tampa money that did come in here. But the Chiefs, who have looked really good this season and could be 3-0, what do you think of the spread for them on this one?
It's a very tough one because of the injury situation for the Buccaneers. Mike Evans should be back from suspension. Julio Jones might be back, might not be back. Donovan Smith, the left tackle, might be back, might not be back. I think those are really some very interesting injury reports to come out for the Bucs in the upcoming days. I think that open of 3 is more reflective of recent performances rather than preseason priors, obviously, because going into the season with a full strength Bucs offense, I don't think this game would ever open at 3. And initial money came in on the Buccaneers saying, hey, they don't deserve to be a 3-point underdog at home with some potential players coming back. And going through the week, I think we have a wide range of outcomes for this line. I think from pick'em to the field goal, everything is possible, and it just depends on the injuries for the Bucs, the venue where these two teams are going to play, because even if the home field advantage is minimal, it might be 0 for the Buccaneers this week because they're both traveling to either city. So, very interesting line movement to follow this week.
And I remember it was either 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago, you're talking about Harrison Butker being missing from the Chiefs. And I remember you mentioned that Butker being out could actually make the spread favor the Chiefs even more. Last week, it certainly did not appear as though that was the case. Has your stance changed on the Chiefs in terms of Butker being available? If Butker were to be available, do you think that would shrink the spread compared to if he's not available? Would that increase the spread to favor the Chiefs more? How has that sort of changed after watching the debacle for special teams last week?
Very tough question because, last week they went for it on 4th and 10, which was ridiculous.
Interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, very interesting, because I think if you want to increase some variance, it's completely fine to attempt a field goal fake every now and then, but please do it at like 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 or whatever, and not at 4th and 10. It takes some very big balls to attempt such a fake field goal try. Danny Amendola, I'm sorry, not Danny Amendola, I actually forgot that name of the kicker. Amendola, he also missed a crucial field goal, I think, or a crucial extra point.
He did miss. I forget it was a field. He missed a kick. Yeah.
Yes. He missed a kick. And also attempting that 4th and 10 might not be the biggest confidence in your kicker. So going into this week, I don't know who is going to be the kicker for them. If it's not Butker, maybe they will go for it on 4th down, because I also think that when a team decides to try a fake field goal or a fake punt in 1 week, the opposing team will absolutely have that on their radar going into next week. So we usually see some more, let's say, preventive formations on those punt and field goal attempts because teams are preparing more for a potential fake punt or fake kick if they have seen it on tape from the week before. So I think going to this week, we will likely not see a fake situation from the Chiefs. But if it's not Butker and it's 4th and short, we might see an uptick in Andy Reid's risk tolerance to go for it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I was going to say something like that. There was 2 things that confused me about that play. Other than just going for it on 4th and 10 on a field goal fake. Number one, you watch the play, even if the pass was completed, they still were not getting that first down, I don't think. I don't think they were even close to that first down line. Number 2, you've got Patrick Mahomes on your team. If you're going to go for it on 4th down, put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands and see if he can figure something out. Don't go for a fake. So I think we might see a lot more of just, no trick plays, just get the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands and see if you can come with a play on 4th down. I think that's a much more fruitful thing. But I'm sure they have had numerous discussions about that play over the course of the week and leading into that primetime game. But that is all that we have here. It's always great to get your insights, Suuma, on all of the NFL action. And you can do so on this channel every Wednesday with Between the Lines. But also, if you want to get more from Suuma, he has an article that goes out every Monday breaking down the action from the weekend of the NFL. It's a great read, and I highly suggest you check it out on the hammer.bet website. That is the hammer.bet. You can also just type in hammer.bet if you don't want to type in those extra 3 letters. It will take you to the exact same place on that website where you find the article. Plenty of other shows that you can check out, such as the prop show going out on Friday on this channel as well with the Hitman. Be sure to check that one out as well. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we have Luke's Locks outside of Cincinnati Bengals Stadium there. Super excited for that live one, courtesy of Betfair for that one. I am super excited to be in attendance for that game. And I'm excited to see what kind of lock Luke comes up with for that one. So make sure you guys are tuning in. But before we go, Suuma, any final words before we close it out and get ready for week 4 of the NFL?
Not really. I wish you guys lots of fun in Cincinnati, and I hope you are going to have finally a primetime game that does not go under by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, the last 2. I mean, I'm a Giants fan, as you see here. That was a rough watch on Monday. Even if the Giants had won, that would have been a rough watch. And that Broncos 49ers game, oh my goodness. That was a bit of a snooze fest. But I hope Tua is available to brighten it up a little bit. But we have the potential for some fireworks in this primetime affair. And I hope that we get that. But from everybody at the Hammer Betting Network, especially from me and Suuma, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel and consider checking out the podcast platforms as well if you prefer to listen to the audio rather than to see our nice faces. But whatever way you consume the content, be sure to follow and subscribe. Consider turn on the notifications as well. And also to drop a like and potentially give 5 stars. Thank you so much again. Good luck with all your bets this week, and we'll see you next time.